Ayan, kamusta naman kayo dyan? Shout out again dun sa ating mga followers, friends, and new friends and followers, and our really gracious host sa West Visayas State University kanina sa Iloilo. Napakagandang syudad talagang Iloilo. I knew Iloilo was beautiful, from the Esplanade to the beautiful cathedral to the wide boulevards to the extremely friendly people of Iloilo, and the amazing food in Iloilo. So thank you so much again sa ating mga kaibigan, sa sa kanina dun sa ating FYI voter education series naman in person sa mga campuses naman, na base sa mga nakita ko kanina, up to 1,000 students na nag-attend. I think not only from uh, our gracious hosts university, but also from other university in Western Visayas and beyond. So thank you so much sa lahat ng mga estudyante, sa ating mga kaibigan, sa mga different deans, the associates, sa mga fellow academics na nag-attend kanina sa talk natin, together with Dean Gad of CSB LaSalle, for Dr. Sherwin Ona of De La Salle University, Political Science Department. Kasama din natin, of course, si Professor Cleve Arguelles, and of course also Dean Ed naman. Thank you so much again sa wonderful moment we had there. Sobrang warm talaga mga tao, sobrang friendly talaga from the moment we arrived there sa Iloilo International Airport kaninang 5 a.m. uh, and all the way up to yung ating departure kanina going here back to Manila. Talagang sobrang friendly talagang mga kaibigan natin. So thank you so much guys, our good friends from Iloilo, at saka yung mga kameta natin dyan, including for the wonderful questions that were asked, no? I shared the link kanina via our good media friends dyan sa Iloilo kanina dun sa talk namin. I don't know how good was the audio from our side kasi medyo pang concert kasi, parang cultural center kasi yung event. So, kaya ang laki-laki, up to I think 1,000 students at least based on the attendance sheet nakita namin. So thank you so much for your attendance. I hope na narinig kami na mabuti. Sabi naman yung iba, medyo clear naman doon sa video. So check out yung shinare namin kanina, because we had some very interesting discussions kanina about West Philippine Sea, about basically Team Pinas kami kanina. West Philippine Sea, interest ng Pilipinas sa West Philippine Sea, ating elections, ICC, impeachment issue, among other things, no? And in fact, towards the end doon sa voter education issue, diniscuss ko yung parating kong sinasabi na tactical voting, gaano kahalaga yung to be smart, to be realistic, and at the same time to be also principled, right? Kasi hindi pwede purong pragmatic lang, hindi next thing you know wala ka ng prinsipyo sa buhay. Hindi rin pwede purong puris ka lang, next thing you know wala kang magagawa sa buhay dahil never ka mananalo. So it's getting the right balance there, right? So that was the one of the interventions we made. In addition, guys, of course, dun sa pinag-usapan natin about the importance of getting the policies right, patriotism right, among other things. So thank you so much again sa ating mga gracious host, and really I suggest for those who haven't been to the beautiful city of Iloilo, please make sure you make time. It's well worth it. And God willing, next time pagbalik natin, we'll make sure we'll spend even more time there. So, talagang kulang na kulang talaga ng isang araw. Pero kailangan natin balikan talaga dahil sa mga ating mga commitments bukas. So, thank you so much again, guys. Shout out again sa mga kaibigan natin, followers natin. And hope we can continue this kind of dialogue, conversation. I think some of my colleagues will be also visiting Bulacan. I think State University bukas. There are going to be also events in Cebu, different parts of the country over the coming weeks and months. And so in my own little way, I'm more than happy to be joined dun sa mga ibang kaibigan natin na like-minded, patriotic, and high-quality, really genuine social scientists and academics and experts na minamahal na nila ang bansa natin. So hindi ito election period effort lang. So it's an education, political education program na gusto natin maging more listening tour actually down the road. So kaya I was more excited about the questions, and halos na all questions are amazingly good. I mean, makikita mo talaga na ang taas talaga ng kalidad ng edukasyon sa iba't ibang lugar sa ating bansa, and I really felt the level of interest, sincere interest, and sincere I would say also really robust research that the good students and yung mga ating mga kaibigan from Iloilo put during the question and answer portion. Talagang lahat kami napasubo subok. And then I felt it was important for me to make some strong interventions, including potentially controversial interventions. And then the next thing you know, here you are once again. We see a great sign of former VP Leni Robredo's leadership. Actually, VP Leni was at the top of my head because I saw early this morning, nag-share ng isang survey kung saan I think only double R numero ang gumagawa ng mga ganitong survey, kung saan tinanong mga tao, sa tingin nyo ba would Leni have been would she have been a better president had she won back in 2022? And almost 6 out of 10 Filipinos said yes, she would have been a much better president had she been victorious back in 2022. So you can see the continued relevance and the continued respect and popularity and the political influence that the former vice president had. And of course, no question why, di ba? Kasi yung brand niya talaga, brand niya ng good governance, sincere leadership, yung kanyang track record in terms of accountability, sunod-sunod year after year, she was really the star office. Kahit konting budget niya, ang dami niya nagawa for pandemic. Kahit konti ng budget niya, ang daming serbisyo na nagawa. And you could see that hindi lang marami siyang ginawang serbisyo with limited funds, but she was also able to do it in the most transparent, in the most democratic and accountable way. So, kaya hindi ako surprised na mataas-taas talaga yung continued support and trust in former VP Leni Robredo. And that's why, at yun ang pag-usapan natin today, that's why what VP Leni says matters, and what VP Leni Robredo stands for matters, diba? And in that context, guys, ito yung survey na sinasabi ko kanina. So, if titignan nyo, so 6 out of 10 Filipinos ay nagsabi dito sa survey ng WR numero na they would have, basically, they would have preferred siguro si Leni na lang presidente na ngayon. And interesting, you can see na very strong si Leni Robredo sa Mindanao at around 61%, in Visayas at 77%, pinakamalakas sa Visayas, 52% in west of Luzon, and Metro Manila at around 46%. And makita natin among Gen Z, age 30 and below, 62%, 56% in the next age bracket, and around 56% from age 60 and above. No? So yun yung mga areas of strength ni VP Leni, which tells you talaga whether she decides to run for a higher office come 2028, whether she wants to make another run at the presidency, among others. What's clear is that she's seen as still as a national leader. Mataas talagang respeto sa kanya. And I think now, in retrospect, after 6 years of Duterte and 3 years of BBM, siguro yung ibang kababayan natin ay namulat, or at least yung mga ibang kababayan natin nakikita nila what a brand of Leni leadership could have meant for the country. Now, as you know, guys, I when I feel something ay hindi maganda, I call it out, and when I feel something is done rightly, I also support it. So hindi tayo personality based in terms of our politics. We are merit based. We're merit based in terms of our politics. We are policy based in terms of our politics, but we're also pragmatic in terms of understanding ano yung mga coordinates of possibilities when it comes to our politics. So it's precisely within that context that you see not only is Leni Robredo continuously relevant when it comes to national leadership. Hindi totoo na nakalimutan na siya, nag-move on na siya, although she's running for a local position sa darating na election this year. It's very clear that at the national level, hindi lang 100% yung awareness sa kanya. At the national level, you can see that ang taas pa rin ang respeto sa kanya, if not Totga, right? Yung the one that got away sense about her. And as I said, well, the thing with Totga is that it can always be fixed, right? Bata pa naman si... and, remember, BBM lost the vice presidency in 2016. Next year, he became the president. So who knows? Someone who won the vice presidency, at least first runner-up sa presidency against all odds, against back then the unity team. Who knows? Maybe if she runs in 2028, she'll still have a very, very good chance. Or at least this is what some of the surveys show. So kudos to Double R Numero for conducting these kinds of surveys, because I think mahalaga yan. Mahalaga yan to appreciate what Attorney Leni Robredo brings to the table as far as hindi lang good governance, but as far as authoritative leadership at the national level is concerned. So in that context, the next thing you know, just shortly after intervention, of course, I'm not saying it's because of me na ganun, but I felt, hindi naman vindicated, but I was glad to see na hindi lang tayo nag-iisip ng wisdom of some sort of tactical alliance, tactical voting, some sort of grand coalition, at least for this darating sa elections. And so I was very, I would say, heartened to see.
Sabi ni Senator Pacquiao, papasubli untaka daw. Dapat kaya siguradong safe ka pirmi, papasubli untaka. Ayun po, nakikinig na nindo ka. Magkalaban na kami ngayon. Magkalaban na kami. Sige pa ang tabang sa ko. Sabi ko, Sen, nagkalaban tayo for president, pero tulong pa pa din ang tulong sa...
So the good former VP, made a reminder of saan galing yung kanyang magaan na loob, if not definitely more than just magaan na loob kay former Senator Manny Pacquiao, who's running for Senate, by the way. He did slid a bit dun sa mga surveys recently, but he's very much competitive to enter. And remember, he's running as Alianza on the administration ticket, meaning expected na the final vote, will, that come election day, things will be more in his favor than not, because iba talaga pag nasa admin ka, diba? Like if you're in the admin, not only is there the machinery, also protektado ka from kalokohan, diba? So although pasok dun sa ibang survey medyo labas, mataas pa rin ang chance ni Senator Manny Pacquiao to return to the Senate. So again, so ito ulit yung context ni so ito yung context again ni VP Leni Robredo's intervention. So inexplain niya, and again via TV5, inexplain niya kanina bakit niya in-endorse si Manny Pacquiao is because of the friendship they developed, the camaraderie they developed, and also yung sincere kindness that former Senator Pacquiao displayed during sa campaign, even though magkalaban sila. Obviously, Manny Pacquiao is not the only candidate na hindi kasama sa pink candidates and progressive candidates na endorse niya. From my understanding, also the former DLG Secretary Abalos din. Again, in the case of Abalos, slightly lower siya than Pacquiao, but again, because he's part of the Alianza, and as some would say, expect a 5 to 10% boost if when you're part of the administration, or at the very least you're protected from sabotage or warlords, mass voting against you or command voting against you, and not to mention the resources that the Alianza brings. So that means actually, if you look at it, both Abalos and Pacquiao are very, very competitive, even though they're not doing as well as they would want to. Even though surprisingly, Pacquiao actually has been going on a downward trajectory over the past few months, but nevertheless, so both for Pacquiao and for Abalos, this means a lot, because just as I mentioned kanina, Leni Robredo has tremendous amount of she enjoys tremendous amount of respect. In fact, may Totka effect across the country, very high in Visayas, but also high in Mindanao, and significant also in parts of Luzon, even though she's just running for LGU in this race. But again, she's a national figure. May endorsement power si Leni Robredo. So the other week, nakita natin yung Sara Aimee one. As I said, I'm not sure how that made sense. It made sense only in the sense that, well, if Aimee makes it, which we'll discuss very shortly, then sigurado si Sara na she'll have at least one protection, if not, more than just a vote in her favor should things move towards impeachment and other things sa darating na Senado, sa next Senate, no? So maybe that's what Aimee brings for Sara. And in the case of Sara, of course, I'm is hoping that Sara can corral enough people from the DDS camp to consolidate behind her. As we discussed with Sir Ronald, tayo in different platforms, medyo risky yan for both of them because if Amy loses, it reflects badly not on BBM anymore. It's going to reflect badly on Sara. We also know that many mga leaders within DDS camp are not sold on Amy Marcos. Whether it's Honilet, the common law wife of the former president, whether it's Salvador Panelo, the former spokesman, legal advice, chief legal advisor of the president. There are a couple of people within the DDS camp na hindi sila sold, basically. Hindi sila convincido na they have to go for another Marcos. At the same time, we see there are certain efforts to make this work. I think on TikTok, on different platforms, you see itong idea na, sige na nga, dahil kahit ayoko pa rin sa mga Marcoses dahil in-endorse ni Inday at mahal ko si Inday at may tiwala kay Inday, sige na nga, maybe I'll go for another one. But as I said, medyo suspect yung strategy na yan. As I said, maybe Sara brings much more to the table for Amy, who's desperate now to be within the winning range. And the fact that Amy is no longer with the administration side, she will not be benefiting from the machinery of the state and every advantage that it comes with it. So Amy clearly is desperate. And in the case of Sara, maybe she's also desperate in a sense that she wants to make sure that she has as many allies as possible sa darating na sa Senado. I mean, let's just be brutally honest. Real talk lang ito, di ba? Because otherwise, I don't know how this makes sense. Why would Sara endorse someone who's so struggling in the surveys and not to mention carries the same family name of or comes from the same family na ina-attack ng mga Dutertes? Kaya nga sabi ko, actually sobrang lalabas na hipokrito ang vice-presidente natin ngayon because, well, I thought galit kayo sa Marcos dictatorship legacy and then biglang okay ka pa rin dun sa isa pang Marcos just because naghihiring siya na basically in favor of your dad or something. But it gets more like, it makes a mockery out of this whole DDS, suddenly anti-Marcos people power turn, right? So it's a big risk on the part of Sara. But again, real talk, it makes sense for Sara in only in so far as if it works, then Amy for sure will be a very loyal ally and friend for her sa darating na Senado. So forget about objectivity, about what some see as the preponderance of evidence in terms of yung mga alleged kababalagan na nangyari sa DepEd nung time na ng pamumuno ni Sara Duterte sa DepEd, among others. Okay. Of course, as I mentioned kanina, like, tingnan mo yung mga survey, how can survey make sense when like, mas tumaas pa yung satisfaction ni Sara nung wala siyang basically any real portfolio, right? Parang satisfaction saan, right? Satisfaction saan, right? Exactly. So, kaya minsan ayoko rin seryoso yung mga survey. But having said that, what is clear, at least from what we gather, is that Leni is very important. Leni has an endorsement power. And definitely, if you're Pacquiao, who is within the range, but not doing as good, you want to get the Leni votes behind you, or at least some of the Leni votes behind you. If you're Abalos, who is competitive, but still not doing as well, you want the Leni vote behind you. And alyansa to mga to, administration mga to, and so so in a sense, you could imagine them, despite the fact that they're quite strong in the surveys or not doing as well as they should do, they can still make it to the Magic 12 come the election day because of the fact that they have the incumbency and the machinery of the state behind them, and they're already within the range, or in the case of Pacquiao, at least pasok sa top 12 dun sa ibang surveys na nakikita natin. Alright? So, I think this is precisely where the tactical voting discussion comes in. Now, speaking of tactical voting, kaya nga, consciously we're saying tactical voting, not like purist principled voting, right? And this is where you can see the leadership of Leni Robredo, and I would say also her political savvy, right? The timing is very important. Why is timing important? So as I said, we get really detailed surveys from different sides, and one of the detailed surveys that I got was interesting because at least ayon dito sa survey na ito, and it comes from a very reliable source, at hindi yan yung mga usual survey agencies and all. Itong mga tao na to talaga, this is for their own internal. Kaya mas may tiwala pa ako to kasi this is really for their internal lang. Actually, interestingly sa survey na ito, ang lumalabas is up to 21% ng mga voters, 21% of voters actually make their final decision on the election day mismo. So, that means, what? More than 2 weeks removed from election day, you may have up to a quarter of your voters na hindi pa rin decided. Especially when you're talking about Senate kung saan 12 yung options mo, right? And I'm not sure how many people will fill up the 12, but uh, I think up to this point, my favorite na each person, but filling it up to 12 or up to 8 or up to 6 or even up to 4 and 5, ang dami pa rin pwede mag-decide up to election day. So these are the numbers that we're seeing right now. That up to 21% of people decide on the day itself. On the day itself, right? So kaya mahalaga yung intervention ni former Vice President Leni Robredo, Attorney Leni, because we're still way removed from the election day, and for all you know, baka 25-30% of people are still undecided. And if you're Manny Pacquiao and your Abalos, who can expect around 5 to 10% bump, Alianza, and then could expect a few percent bump because of the Leni endorsement, then boom, suddenly you are feeling good about your chances. Right? Now, on the part of Leni, why did this make sense? I think the good former vice president has a reading of the situation that I would hazard to say, I would dare deign to say, maybe similar to our reading, which is, okay, Bam, good chance, Kiko, good chance, not sure, good chance, and then there are a couple of other rising stars, see Heidi among others. But you want to get as many people as possible in the next Senate who will vote on the right side of history. Now, when it comes to Manny Pacquiao, maybe I will, how should I put it? Maybe, about Manny Pacquiao, sorry, akala ko there was a awarding something na message. About Manny Pacquiao, I don't know if Riza will endorse him. If Riza endorses him, because obviously, when it comes to Senator Pacquiao, he has made some very, very, I would say, problematic interventions in the past. Whether it's his statement, moral judgment on certain minority groups, alam niyo na yung sinasabi natin. Uh, of course, the fact that Pacquiao, parating absentee, 'di ba, sa ilang bang mga bills na napasan niya, 'di ba? How efficient was he? I heard some people calling him a journeyman, he's still feeling like wala siya masyadong mapakita as a senator. And then of course, for me, even more problematic, the fact that he was a Duterte ally, staunch Duterte ally way into towards the end of the Duterte administration, and then nagkaroon ng break noon when, well, of course Pacquiao wanted to run, and then okay, you connect the dots, right? So obviously, personally, I'm not in a, I don't feel confident endorsing Pacquiao in any sense of the word. But Pacquiao has a good chance to become a senator again, and especially with the Leni endorsement. And when it comes to Senator Pacquiao, at least if there's one thing we can say na sigurado na maganda about him, is that in fairness, when it comes to the issue of corruption, walang bahid ng corruption si Senator Pacquiao. Or at least yun ang pag-intindi natin. Last time I checked, this is a guy who earned his own wealth. This is a guy who helped so many people throughout the years. Again, does that make him a great senator? Not really. Is his track record fantastic? Not really. But what was the tactical voting discussion all about, right? Pacquiao could make sure hindi makapasok yung mga ibang candidates na mas malapit sa kabilang kampo, right? And I think if Pacquiao was presented with the preponderance of evidence na talagang may kababalakan nangyari in terms of corruption and also DepEd, I think he'll vote on the right side of history. As far as the former DLG Secretary Abalos is concerned, again, we can have a long conversation. That weird thing with ikaw naman, yung kay Alice Go, and like we can go on and on and on, and like, Abalos and Mandaluyong, like, sure, again, if I were to take a purist stance or anything like that, absolutely, there's no, I absolutely, we're not in a position to be fully confident to endorse someone like that. But then again, Abalos not only has a good chance to win, he will be much more competitive because of the admin element. But again, if Abalos makes it to the Senate, it will be thanks to Leni endorsement and thanks to BBM's slate and support and everything like that. So come decision time, I think we can quite credibly project, right, where will he stand if makakaroon ng trial and then there's a the preponderance of evidence. So again, none of you have to prove anything to me. There's a reason why I personally never endorse any of, alam mo na. But I can see where Vice President Leni Robredo is coming from. I think this is precisely the kind of tactical voting I was talking about. If you have 12 options for Senate, 2 or 3 or 4 na mas genuine progressive liberal my chance, and then there are 2 or 3 others na not progressive liberal, but you know that push comes to shove, they'll vote on the right side of history, and most importantly, they could prevent other candidates na within similar range as them, na you know that pag makapasok sa Senado mga to medyo malabo, if not baka ma-block pa nila, baka they'll not even entertain even a trial despite the preponderance of evidence, not to mention baka mag-Amy Marcos mode pa sila, then it perfectly makes sense where Leni's coming from. So this is where you see, guys, in fairness kay former VP Leni Robredo, it's not only good governance and sincere public service that she represents. She has also time and again shown tremendous amount of tactical savvy. And I think this is, again, another sign. Again, I don't think neither yours truly nor Lenny or anyone is forcing anyone to vote along a certain line. But I think her endorsement of Manny Pacquiao, her endorsement of, in this case, the ELG Secretary Abalos, is at least a kind of a reflection of that kind of tactical thinking that we were talking about, right? Again, I know, I saw your responses. I saw a lot of people said, no way, talking about, Pacquiao's track record or lack thereof and problematic interventions, his alliance with Duterte back in the day, PDP lang. I get it, completely I get it. And you don't have to tell me anything about yung kakulungan dun sa isa pang candidate, etc. But again, remember, this is not only about a referendum on Marcos. This is also about, will there be enough number of independent-minded or right-minded senators in the next Senate to make sure that, to begin with, there will be at least a movement towards accountability. Because as of now, there's not even that movement. I mean, forthwith, ilan buwan na yung forthwith na yan? 3 buwan na, mag-4 na buwan na, diba? I mean, it's crazy. So, basically, walang kwenta yung status quo when it comes to the issue of accountability on that front, on the forthwith front. But you want to get as many people na hindi beholden sa Dutertes or hindi questionable ang moral and political positioning inside. So that's where the tactical voting comes from. And I think that's exactly why Leni is right. From a tactical, strategic, not strategic, but tactical, realpolitik point of view. Which for me also shows maturity of political leadership. Because it's so easy to be pure and perfect and all, and just, be happy with your moral purity and all. And at the same time, the world is going to hell, right? That's why politics is about hard choices, guys. Politics was never about black and white all the time. There are issues na black and white, like, EJK is wrong, period. Black and white question, yeah. But in terms of alliances, grand coalitions, alignments, those things are tactical questions. There's a war of maneuver, there's a war of position, right? Now, having said that, sabi ko nga, itong election cycle na yan, it's gonna be very difficult. Again, there's a very high chance na kahit isang progressive candidate na hindi papasok. There's a very high chance na the next Congress and next Senate will be even more problematic than what we have right now, which is, my goodness, kahoror. But there's also a very good chance that if tactical decisions are made and tactical voting happens, you might get just good enough combination of people in the next Senate so that you can at least act upon or operationalize yung forthwith na yan. Do you get what I'm saying? So in fairness, I think it was quite an act of political courage for VP Leni to come out. Precisely because, as I can see in the comment section, there are many people who are not happy to vote and will definitely not vote for some of these candidates endorsed by Leni. But Leni took that chance. So I think that's a sign of leadership, and I think she has to take credit for that. Then comes even the more difficult question of tactical voting in terms of how do you make sure the good party lists make it? Because remember, sa Senate, you have 12 options. Sa party list, you can only choose one. And when you can only choose one, how do you make sure that the good candidates get in? Right? So remember, Chel Jokno is Akbayan, but Akbayan also has second and third nominees. And kasama dun sa 3 nominees is yung kasalukuyan na Congressman Percy Sendanya, whom we had on this show on multiple occasions, and yung sponsor ng first impeachment complaint, and someone very principled, very passionate, palaban. And then you have the mamayan liberal, tatlo, di ba? You have, of course, former Senator Laila De Lima, and then you have, of course, former Congressman Maguilat, and then former Congressman Tanyada. I mean, these are not lightweight people when it comes to their legislative and political advocacy and progressive track record. I mean, and in the case of Senator De Lima, I mean, she's a hero to a lot of people, right? Precisely because of the thing. And then you have Magdalo. Again, I know that some people, I remember, anong term na ginamit ni Kristan dati, sabi niya na-cringe daw siya kay, I understand, like military, dati mga kupla, I get it. But don't forget, si Gary Alejano ng Magdalo, for instance, yung first nominee nila, for instance. This was a person na kasama ni Senator Trillanes when they filed ICC. He's the only one I know, or at least the first one I know in the Congress who dared to file impeachment against Duterte for abuse of power at the height of Duterte's power. So that was quite a courageous move, to put it mildly, on the part of Gary Alejano and the people from the Magdalo party lists, right? Who, by the way, were in prison for their wrongdoings and their extra constitutional coup attempts in the past, but they proved their mettle and their commitment to constitutional democracy over the past decade or so, just like former Senator Trillanes, who's running for mayor right now. And importantly, in the case of former Congressman Gary Alejano, this is someone na hindi lang patriotic sa West Philippine Sea, former Philippine Navy yan. This is a person who stood up to Duterte in the scariest days, and this is a person that, together with Senator Trillanes, was one of the groups that filed communication sa ICC, which made it possible for Duterte to end up there. So, now ang tanong dito is, how should progressive, pink, whatever voters you want to call them, how should they make sure that they divide their votes enough to make sure na makapasok lahat ng mga matitinong kandidato na party list? Because you can only vote for one. And this is where, again, as I said, you need to see leadership, exercise of leadership, whether it's by Leni, by Risa, by Senator, well, in the case of Senator Trillanes kasi, he represents Magdalo, so he'll just talk about Magdalo, obviously. But you need someone up there, someone with gravitas, someone with authority who says, okay, kung 15, 16 million ang bumoto kay Risa, 15 million bumoto kay Leni, right? Actually, kung taga 1 million plus lang each of this party list, which is like 1/5 of the vote that went for Leni, then you can get more, a couple of very good next congressmen in on the parties. But that has to be coordinated, and it's very difficult. I don't buy, like what Sir Ronald was saying kahapon in terms of of course, we don't know the exact number that is needed to get 2 or 3 nominees in, but we know that the range is around 600,000 to 1 million to get at least around 2 nominees in. I think 1 million could almost assure that we'll get 2 nominees in. At least based on some of the surveys I've seen, and if you do a regression analysis in the past. So, then that is actually a much more organizationally and to a certain degree arithmetically complicated one. But do not forget also the party list competition, because you want to get the right party list people in, right? Kanina kung ano-anong inisip namin ng party list para mag-troll lang to just show na like how much the system has been diluted, to put it, and adulterated, to put it really mildly. But the good thing is there are good progressive folks with very, very high caliber. In the case of Chel Jokna, look at the caliber he brings. In the case of Percy Sandan, look at the caliber he brings. Look in the case of Senator De Lima, look at the caliber they bring. In the case of Gary Alejano, so you have to look at those things. So I think it's time really to have this kind of serious, tactical, organizational, and arithmetically sound conversation. Otherwise, ang makakapasok sa next Senate mo ay alam mo na, yung mga naghahanap ng bakanteng yung sa kapatid niya, parang di ba si Mama OG, meron siyang lista na sinong ayaw na bubotohin, yung mga blind item style. Right? Kailangan ba natin pangalanan, di ba? Yung iba na hep-hepuray na lang siguro gagawin at medyo pick with mga ka-DDS natin ngayon, di ba? You know what I'm saying? And sobrang excited natin na shut down yung franchise ng ABS-CBN. Of course, who are these people, right? So, and then you go to the party list situation, my goodness, kulang na lang kung ano ng party list na lang gagawin ng, like some of the party lists, like how are these people representative of marginalized groups? It's a mockery of the entire system. It's a mockery of our democracy, right? So you want to make sure. I mean, imagine if some of these clowns get into the next Congress and then hindi makapasok yung mga caliber ni Chell and Gary and you know the Lima and mga others, like, my goodness. Just on the level of, in terms of legislative intelligence, legislative IQ, in terms of track record, in terms of standing up for human rights, in terms of courage. So don't forget the party list raised also. And I think dun sa mga leaders ng opposition, they have to really come out and try to organize something to make sure all of these party lists get at least 1 million or so votes. And that's just barely a fifth of the total vote that went for Leni back in 2022. So it's not totally crazy and out of this world. But it has to be organized. It has to be properly coordinated. Hindi yan madali, but guess what, guys? In other countries, how do you think they beat populists? They coalesce. They create Big Ten coalitions. And Big Ten coalitions are inevitably riddled with compromise and difficult choices, or as Hillary would say, hard choices, right? Because it's easy to be pure and purist principled and just indulge in, I don't know, moralistic narcissism. What is hard is making the hard choices, getting criticized for it, because you want things to move in the right direction. You want to nudge history in the right direction. Even if that means you're going to get backlash, you're going to get criticism, and you might end up endorsing the wrong people, thinking these people will make the right choice, and the next thing you know, they actually may not. So there's always that element of risk, of immediate backlash and long-term disappointment. Absolutely. But that's what politics is about. It's about wager. You have to make a wager. You have to take that risk. It's difficult. It's difficult. Kaya nga sabi ko, maturity is an issue here. We need democratic maturity. We need political maturity. And we need leadership more than ever. If you want to make sure that there's just enough number of good enough people in the next Congress para naman may pag-asa ang mundo. Right? Para hindi mawala ng ganang tao. And as I said, this is the war of maneuver. And then there's the war of position, which is, if you get good number of good enough people into the next Congress, you can build on that for something even more transformative and, yes, more principled and pure for 2028. Pero good luck sa'yo to have any momentum in 2028 kung 2025 palang wipe out ka na. Some of the party lists I mentioned, if they don't win any office, any seat this one, dissolve na sila. Basically, existential moment na sa kanila yan. You know, just to put it that way. Yung iba naman, bago pa lang, so baka kung wala silang mapanalo, mawala na rin. Diba? So that's what I'm saying, guys. Real talk na to. Real talk talaga to. Real talk na to. So I said, again, it's easy to be pure and perfect and, you know, like, and wala nang pag-asa, basta ako pure and perfect. But, you know, we don't have the luxury for moral narcissism. Let's just be honest about it. This is real talk moment. These are difficult choices. It could backfire. It is backfiring. As of now, I can already see in the comment sections, it is risky. It is morally risky. It's politically risky. I understand it completely. But that's what maturity and leadership is all about at this point in time. So I want to see more of that leadership that we saw from Leni Robredo today. There has to be more of that. Because otherwise, guys, good luck na lang sa atin. Good luck na lang sa atin. Unlike yung mga ka-DDS natin na nagko-comment dito, hindi tayo bumoto kay BBM because we were always clear-eyed about the Marcos dictatorship and his horrible legacy. Unlike dun sa mga kaplastikan at hypocrite natin ng mga ka-DDS na followers, we were always consistent in calling it out. And unlike dun sa mga kaibigan natin na iba dyan, we can distinguish between purgatory and the seventh circuit of hell. In the Dante Alighieri's, literary imaginary, right? If I can put it that way, right? There are levels to this. All right. So and speaking of levels, the level of hypocrisy I see from our KDDS friends, right, who supported the Marcoses, helped them to come back to power, and then now supporting another Marcos and trying to justify that, walang tatalo sa that level of hypocrisy. To talk about independence from US, pero tuta naman dun sa kabila na binubuli tayo sa West Philippine Sea, that is hypocrisy. Right? To talk about press freedom, to talk about bayani, ganon, and then the next thing you know, sila pala yung nagsusupport ng shutdown ng ABS-CBN, harassment of Rappler based on all of the mumbo-jumbo cases, that's hypocrisy. You want to talk about budol and hypocrisy? Let's talk about the drug war, right? 99% ng mga victims ng drug war ay mga poorest of the poor Filipinos. saan yung mga totoong big fish? Including yung isa na minit si Digong sa Malacanang noon. That's hypocrisy. Mahabang listahan yan, guys. I'm more than happy to roll out the full list of the budol and hypocrisy of yung ibang kaibigan natin dyan. So be very, very careful before using the word hypocrisy, because you were the guys who were supporting Marcos in 2016, you supported Marcos in 2022, and only when things were not going your way, turned against the Marcoses, and then go people power and all. And then suddenly, next thing I know, you're endorsing another Marcos. Amy Marcos, who last time I checked did not disown her father's legacy in terms of the dictatorship and all of that. That is hypocrisy, my friends. That is hypocrisy. So maayos-ayos naman kayo sa buhay kasi namumulat na yung mga ibang kaibigan natin. So again, Leni was right, and I hope to see more of this kind of leadership, not because it's perfect, not because it's pure, not because it's ideal, absolutely not, but because it at least plants the seed for real transformative change and also some chance for accountability in the near future. War of maneuver, war of position, Gramsci. Always. On that note, muchas gracias. Grazie. Grazie mille. Thank you so much, guys. Again, I'm coming from really, as best as I could, a deep understanding of motions of history, if I can put it that way, right? So alam ko mahirap itong mga conversation na ito, but I'm glad to see exercise of leadership, including by former VP Leni Robredo, and kudos to her for this clear, difficult choice she made. But I know she made it because ang tinitignan niya yung kapakanan ng ating bansa, at I'm sure she also cares about accountability, because this is the same person who showed all sorts of accountability and transparency when she was in power, despite all the harassment, all the limitation of resources, and what have you. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat. And sana naman yung mga ibang kaibigan natin na super uber hypocrite level, konting self-awareness naman dyan bago mag-hanash dito. Alright? Thank you very much. God bless and talk to you soon.